Hi, this is Jonesy with Jetters Northwest, and welcome to the Eagle 200 trailer jetter training session. In this session, we'll get you acclimated to your new Eagle 200 jetter, cover safety points, maintenance points, of course operations, nozzles, accessories, everything you really need to get started running your jetter. Now, this is not a replacement for the paper manuals that are included with your jetter. There'll be a manual for the jetter itself, there'll be a manual for the engine, and manuals for the trailer. Definitely recommend you go through those manuals. There'll be information in there that I will not present today. But our goal with this video is to give you a good look at everything as we describe and train, and give you something that you can use for new people or refreshers in the future as it'll be available to you. So let's get started. All right, before we get going, let's talk about safety. The number one safety thing is be trained before you go out and use the jetter. Again, review these videos, review the manuals. Whether you bring on a new person, fully train them please before you send them out with a high pressure piece of equipment. Because whether it's a pressure washer that you bought at the hardware store or a large hydrojetting piece of equipment like this, water jets can cut you, okay? So we'll talk about a little bit of that when we get to the operational part of things. But gotta have your personal protective equipment. I've got my safety glasses. If you're concerned about back blast at all, you might want to wear a shield. Definitely a pair of gloves. I like to have my legs covered. I don't wear shorts. And I've got leather top shoes, you know, leather boots. Those things are really important. So set yourself up so you're well protected when you're doing these jobs out in the field. All right, before we take a trailer out in the field, there's a few things we should cover. Number one, of course, make sure that you jack up the tongue jack once you're secure on the ball. Many times guys bring jetters in is because they drove away with the jack down, they hammered it into a curb, and it needs repair. In fact, by the way, I really highly recommend wherever you are locally, find a local trailer repair place that you can get parts from or can do the basic service on the trailer itself for you. The hitch, got to make sure your hitch is secure. Make sure it's all the way on the ball. Sometimes guys will set it down and there's a clasp in there that will sit on top of the ball if you're not careful. So make sure it's all the way down on the ball. Then you can close it up and make sure your hitch pin's in place so that it can't come undone on you. We'll cover in a moment how to do your safety chains and whatnot and how to hitch up. Moving back with this, we have a hood. We want to make sure that the clasp is on there so it's not going to retract in the wind. As we are driving to a job with water, I've filled the tank completely. This is a 200-gallon tank on the Eagle 200, that's why we call it that. We've got a trailer that has brakes and has enough GVW to tow this highway speeds. So I am not hesitating to fill this tank and drive it down the road. Now, if you are going to drive with it, say, half full, you're going to have some water surge. When you hit the brakes, you'll feel yourself at the stop light moving back and forth a little bit. It's safer if you can just get that water level down to, say, around 30 gallons or so. Then you won't get nearly as much water surge, especially if you're in on highway and you got highway lights and you got to stop fairly quick, okay? So if you're going to drive with water, we really recommend you drive with the tank full. All right, moving back. On this particular model, we have a beacon light. That's a wonderful thing to have on when you're at a site. But before we leave the shop, I like to inspect the jetting hose. Jetting hoses are subject to being ripped through the pipe. You know, sharp edges of cleanouts you got to be careful with. We'll cover that. But if your jet hose has any scuffs or cuts that are getting into the high pressure retaining braid, it's underneath this green jacket. It needs to be red tagged and repaired before you really take it out in the field. Because as I said, high pressure water can cut you. And the most exposure you have to that is this jetting hose. As it comes out of the line or it's leading to the line, if there's a cut in it that finally gives way, then that could hurt you. So you want to, for your own safety and your people, get a good look at the hose, and if you see something questionable, tag it out and get it repaired. Okay, let's cover proper hitching of the Eagle 200 jetter. First of all, you'll need a 2-inch ball on your truck, And you want to make sure the height is set so that the trailer is not raked. You know, keep it nice and level. You know, this is an adjustable height hitch, so it's real nice. We can change this for different size trailers that we do. But we want to center up real nicely here. If you get too far forward, it's easy for, like I said, that clasp to actually land on top of the ball and then you don't grab it. So I've got it lined up. I can just drop this down. And at this point, this is a drop jack. So I can just pull the pin. I don't have to keep winding. And now it's up and out of the way, and I repeat, that is a thing that guys forget a lot. So I'll do that before I even clasp the trailer. And then lock it, get your pin through. We know our ball's secure. Then with the chains, safety chains, you want to cross them over each other. And depending on how close up your point is on the truck, you can twist them a little bit, but you want to have a little bit of a loop to them. So as I pull it through, hang in there nicely, give this one little twist. Then the Eagle 200 trailer has brakes. And so we've got a safety emergency brake here. You want to run this through some point on your truck or on your hitch mechanism so that it doesn't do any good if I just tie it to a chain or something like that. If the chain's brake free, that doesn't help. You want to connect this up to the truck somehow, and the point of this is that if all fails and the trailer comes off the truck, it's going to pull this pin and it's going to activate the brakes. Okay, lastly, we're going to provide power to the trailer, not just for lights and turn signals and whatnot, but for the brakes themselves. So you're going to want a truck that has a connector for a 7-pin plug. If your truck only has a 4-pin connector, like a flat 4-pin, that'll do the lights, but it won't give you the benefit of activating the trailer brake. So I highly recommend, especially if you're going to tow with any water in the jetter, is set up the truck to be equipped with the 7-pin socket that can receive this plug and have it set where it has a brake controller and can activate the brakes of the trailer. That's for your safety, and also it takes a load off of your truck brakes, having the brakes on the trailer slow you down as well. So most trucks today and vans are equipped for this. Just plug it in, make sure it's secure. We do a double check, chains are up out of the way, got our e-brake on, the jack is up and out of the way, we've got power, we're good to take it out on the road. Okay, moving away from the hitch, let's show you some other parts of your trailer before we get back to the operational end of the machine. We have a 12-gallon fuel tank, and it has a primer bulb. Sometimes if you run out of fuel on a hot day, the engine may struggle to pick up a little bit of prime. You can just give it a few pumps, but you don't have to do that every single time. But that's what this is for. And your fuel filter is right there. You should be able to easily see the fuel going through it. Otherwise, it needs to be replaced. Right over here is the main drain for the water tank. Just pull it and it's going to dump water out the 2-inch port. I'm not going to do that right now because it's going to make a mess. And by the way, this training is covering all the new Eagle 200 models. This is a 4010, which means 4,000 PSI, 10 gallons per minute. You might have the 3012 or one of the off models, but the 3012 is definitely the second most popular, and that is 12 gallons a minute at 3,000 PSI. Point is, this training will cover both. They are both in the same series. Moving from there, this has the optional antifreeze system for purging out the water so that the jetter won't freeze with water in it. And that is an option. If you don't have this, you're going to have an air chuck where you can actually use compressed air to blow the water out of the system. Moving over, after you go about, say, 30 miles or so, you're going to want to check those lug nuts, make sure they're tight. There is a lube point here also, by the way, underneath this cover. It's very simple. You'll see that in your trailer manual. And before you hit the road, of course, you want to make sure your tires are in good condition. That's very important. And moving back just a little further, this is where the battery is stored. Battery is not connected when you receive the jetter, so nothing's going to happen until you connect up the negative terminals on the battery. Okay, and if you need any information on that, just give us a call or send us an email at info@jettersnorthwest.com. If you're going to store the jetter for quite a while, it's not a bad idea to disconnect the battery if you say you don't jet during the winter, something to that effect. All right, next scene, we'll move over to the business end of the jetter where the controls are. All right, before we can hydrojet, of course, we need water. And there are two ways you can put water in the jetter. You have an air gap fill here. If you have an opportunity to feed off of a hydrant or an industrial high flow water source, we've got a 2-inch connection here. This is a cam coupler connection, but if you prefer like a fire fitting, you can purchase those locally or online. We don't really carry those. You could adapt this if you want to have like a roll-up hose or something to use the fast fill, as we call it, which is a 2-inch pipe. Of course, you'll need to take the lid off to do so, and I recommend definitely when you get done, make sure that lid is nice and tight. We often hear guys call that they've lost their lid because they didn't tighten it up, as drove down the road and it disappeared. But the more common way to bring water to this jetter is with the water supply hose and hose reel. This is just a storage point right here. This is just a garden hose fitting. What we have here is 100 feet of 3/4 inch industrial water hose. By the way, if you get any extensions, 100 feet's a nice length, but if you do get any extensions, definitely recommend you get at least 3/4 inch. And get a nice rubber industrial hose like this. You know, the hoses that can be at the hardware stores, they kink so easily, and they're not real resilient once they kink. This kinks and it just springs right back. Okay, there is a lock mechanism on here. This allows you to just grab the hose and head toward the nearest spigot to get yourself some water. Now, one thing super nice here is as it feeds into the water tank, it feeds into a float valve. So just like a toilet tank, when the water level gets up to full, the float valve in there is just going to shut off the incoming water. So you don't need to babysit the incoming water. And really, I really need to tell you, the reason for air gap back over here and having the float valve in here also is we're not supposed to just drop a garden hose into the water tank that's full of water, because if the fire department or somebody opens up a hydrant, it can actually create a suction and you can be pulling water out of your tank, which of course is not potable water, into the water system. And if some inspector sees you do that, you might get tagged and fined. So recommend that you feed with either the garden hose or, again, if you have a high flow source, you're having that air gap in there so it can't siphon back. We've got our two different pressure controls here. This is your main jetting on and off for manual operation. This is your pressure regulator to adjust the maximum pressure. Now, as I said moments ago, I like to adjust the pressure with the throttle when I'm running off the main hose, which of course I can do remotely if I have the wireless remote model. But this basically sets the maximum that the jetter will do. So out of the factory, it's set for full pressure. The only time I really dial this back is if I'm using a pressure wash gun or a mini hose, which creates more restriction. All right, up above the pressure regulator is the main pressure control, the jetting on-off valve, or we might call it flow on-off. As you see on the sticker up here, as I bring it up, that's jetting on, which sends water to the hose and to the nozzle, making your pressure come up. And then down is jetting off, where it releases all the pressure, and it's basically pumping back to the water tank. It's important to know that as soon as you turn the key on, if there's water in this, the pump is pumping. So when it's dead, this red handle valve is down, you are in the safety position. It will not build pressure. It'll just recirculate under virtually no pressure at all. So running in manual mode, if I don't have the wireless remote, I'm just jetting manually with the valve, jetting on, jetting off. And you want to go all the way up. If you go not quite all the way up, you can cut the seats of the valve with high pressure water. That's a mistake guys make, and this valve wears out prematurely. Go all the way up, you don't have to slam it up. Just bring it all the way up, there's jetting position, all the way down for jetting off. This is not a regulator. You don't want to regulate your pressure here. Regulate your pressure with your engine throttle to bring the pump faster and slower, or you can set the pressure maximum again with the pressure regulator down here. Now, if you are running with wireless remote control, there's a secondary valve on your machine that is controlled right here with this on the top left pressure on-off button. You can hear the actuator moving the valve. Basically, that sound was the actuator on the second one of these valves, which are in series, going zzz. The actuator is moving it for you. So if you're running wireless remote control, you are going to walk away from the machine with this up, okay, because the wireless controlled valve is already in the safety position, okay? So again, if you're running without wireless remote control in what we call manual mode, this is your main jetting on off. But if you're gonna run wireless remote, which most of you will, your thumb just landing on the pressure control to the top left is going to do your jetting on and off for you. So you'll just be important that when you walk away from the machine, wherever you're gonna run remotely, you're gonna need to make sure this is up. Otherwise, you're gonna go all the way on the roof or behind the building or wherever, and you're gonna push this button, you're gonna get nothing if this is down, because this is safety position. So for remote control, we move this up and we're remote ready. Okay, before we do live jetting, we need to check our oils and clean our filter strainer. So let's start with the oils. I'll lift up the hood. So I just pull up this latch, spring loaded, release it, then ease back the hood. Now, I don't want to just let it go because it'll wham, okay? So I just help it ease back. Those spring loaded struts really push that, but it really helps lift it up. So we have 3 oils to be concerned with your jetter. Engine oil, of course, and our dipstick is right here. Should be nice and clear. Fuel injected gasoline engine, so it generally keeps the oil real clear. If it starts to look dirty, your engine probably needs some service. And the fill point is right here. Then there is an oil filter over here on the side. The oil changes are listed in your manual, but generally speaking, the break-in for the engine and the rest of it is about 30 hours. You change all your oils. And after that, the engine goes like every 100 hours. You would change your oil filter on the first change, and then change your oil filter every other engine oil change. Okay, 10W30 oil is pretty standard. Some of you might use 10W40. Okay, moving on. The water pump has its own oil, and it's 30 weight non-detergent, which is a hydraulic or lubricating oil. Some people call it pressure washer pump oil, okay? And you fill the pump half full. So, and it comes full, all this comes pre-oiled for you. But this big sight glass right here on the side of the pump, you can actually see the oil level, and it should be about halfway up. There is a dipstick in here as well. So, you also, when you check oil for the pump, take a look at it. You want that oil to be a little bit golden color or almost clear. Okay, if your oil starts to look gray or milky, your high pressure seals are wearing out in your pump. They're blowing water back into the crankcase oil, and you need to get your pump serviced. Okay. But the other oil is the transmission or gearbox oil here. It is a 80-90 gear oil, which is, these oils are available in your Napas and places like this, or from us. And the gearbox also, just like the pump, should be about half full. There's a sight glass right here on the end. Some of your older models might have a plug. It's just a brass plug, and you would actually just remove that plug, and if oil comes out, there's plenty of oil in there. And you would fill until the oil starts running out of the plug. But with the sight glass, you just watch the oil come up, and it just needs to read inside that sight glass a little bit where you see there's oil there. If you fill the gearbox too full, this is a breather up on top, it will spit out what it doesn't want. So you want to be real careful not to overfill the gearbox. Okay, again, the break-in for changing all these oils is around 30-40 hours or so. And after that, the pump and the gearbox can go 200-300 hours before you change them. Okay, so they can go quite a ways. So I don't recommend necessarily you do this with hours. You can. There is an hour meter on the jetter right over here on the hood. It's more important to get it on a calendar schedule. You know, if you jet a lot, you know, change your oils maybe 4 times a year with the seasons. If you don't jet very often, you might be doing it once or twice a year. But get it on a schedule and just make sure those maintenances get taken care of. The last thing I want to do before I start jetting is I want to check the filter strainer. This is filtering out any impurities that are in the water tank, gotten in the water. Anything that gets through this filter can be pumped through the pump. It's going to catch everything that's too big to go through the pump, which means it needs to be checked daily. And if I could get the whole jetting world to check their filter strainers weekly, a lot of jetters would go a lot longer between services. Okay, this cannot get plugged up or it's real death to your pump, so you want to check this regularly. And it's very simple. Now there's water in my tank, so it's going to spill water out here as I do it, but it doesn't really matter. Also works as a drain point, but there's a faster drain as I showed you at the start. So I pull the strainer right out. I can dump out anything that's in it. I like to use the water here to get everything flushed out. I can see some debris in there. Probably shavings from when we first drilled holes in the tank to put the fittings in the tank. Everything's clear. If you have trouble getting it clear, you gotta take a toothbrush or something, clean it out good, press it in, and then we just thread it right back in. Just make sure you don't cross thread it. You can go backwards until you fill that first thread. A little tougher to do when water's coming out. Tighten it hand tight, and you're good to get jetting. Okay, as I was cleaning the strainer, you saw the water coming out. You might have noticed this valve here. This valve, when it's pointing toward the water tank, is allowing water to come through the strainer and whatnot. If I move it up in line, this line is going over to the antifreeze tank. So in this position, this is where I would use it to draw antifreeze in to purge all the water out of the jetting system. We won't talk about that process right this moment, but some of your models, if you did not add on the antifreeze tank, you're going to see a Schrader valve here, like is on your tires. And you can move the valve into this position. It will cut off the water flow. So I could have cleaned my strainer, not had water come out. I didn't do that with this model because this connected to antifreeze. I'd have antifreeze all spilling out. But if yours has a Schrader valve, you move this down into this position, and you can put air here, and it will blow compressed air in through the system, and you can purge the water out of the system with the compressed air. One of the nice features of the Eagle 200 jetter is the huge 11 plus cubic foot tool bin. And it is lockable, heavy duty Byers brand. Got double doors, but it actually is one big large compartment. So let's tell you about the contents that are inside the tool bin when you get your jetter. And these might be in a cardboard box, they might not be. It just depends on how many accessories you might have added on or extra nozzles and whatnot. First of all, your paper manuals will be in here, your keys, and you have a flash drive in there. Inside, like here's Kawasaki manual. You want to look for that, and of course get that out, as I said, where everybody can read the manuals. And we have a Tiger Tail safety hose guide. We have a whole video on this. Protect your hose and yourself. But basically you put the jet hose through here, and then you would put this down into the clean out or into the pipe, down in the manhole or whatnot, and it basically protects the hose from pulling up against a sharp edge. So this is a hose protector tool, and it does have a rope so you can lower it down, 25-foot rope, lower it down, and it's another way of getting your hose and your nozzle to go into the pipe down in a deep manhole. Next we have a safety leader hose. What this is an extra 10-foot hose that you would screw into the end of your jetting hose and then put your nozzle on the end of the leader hose, and it gives you a high visibility warning that you're near the end of the hose. Remember I talked about marking your hose for safety? Well, this is a pretty obvious mark here, and this is especially for jetting into manholes, interceptors, or catch basins, where you looking down in there, you can see the orange hose coming and you can know you need to stop. You could use it in a clean out too, but sometimes, you know, this makes for a pretty long fitting between this hose and that. This might not turn through every elbow in your 4-inch pipe or 3-inch pipe, or, you know, going into a clean out. So it's not something you probably use all the time, but it is nice to use when you can, because it also takes the abuse of all the silt or whatever that the nozzle is blasting back at the hose. Basically it becomes a throwaway rather than sending all that material blasting back on your main jetting hose. All right, let's talk about the nozzles that come with your Eagle 200 jetter. All of our nozzles, whether it's brute jetters, Eagle jetters, come with the 4 nozzle set. As you open this up, you'll see the 4 nozzles, and the spray patterns are listed right up here, as well as the names of the nozzles. But in brief, most common nozzle used is the penetrator nozzle. It has 1 forward jet to penetrate and forward blast, and then 6 jets out the rear. And by the way, I get asked, why don't you put all the jets out the front and blast stuff away from you? Well, because the jets, water jets, are also responsible for thrust, and if there's no rear jets to pull the nozzle into the line, and all these nozzles are going to have the bias want to pull themselves in the line, if all the jets are out the front, it's going to blast itself out of the pipe. There are those nozzles available on the market. Some people call them super pushers, but they're for advanced users. So all the nozzles that are provided are going to pull themselves into the line. So your penetrator is your most common nozzle for day-to-day work, soft clogs and whatnot. The flusher nozzle does not have a forward jet, has some wide angle rear jets to basically go upstream and flush backwards. Okay. Also has a lot of thrust because there's no forward jet. The pusher nozzle has 6 rear jets also, but it has 3 jets out the front. It allows you to push and nudge stuff away from the building toward the street. That's the main use of the pusher nozzle. Okay, those first 3 nozzles are all what we call static nozzles. We also have a high-speed rotating nozzle. So basically the center barrel spins, taking the 2 rear jets and spinning them, so you get a nice 360-degree coverage. So this is great for your soft grease, your sludge, things like that. It also has pretty good pulling power because there's no forward jet pushing against it. It makes a real nice high-pitched whine. Sometimes contractors will tell the customer, hey, we're doing a final polish on your line. Some people do call this a polisher, beep, doing a final cleaning. And also in the kit you have an orifice cleaner, so that if one of these little holes, orifices in the nozzle, plugs up, and you'll know that often because you'll have full pressure, but suddenly the nozzle is not pulling very well anymore. It's usually because it's out of balance, some jets are plugged and it's diving right into the pipe wall. But there's that tool, you can push material out of those plug jets and get back in business. Now, those are the basic 4 nozzles that come with the jetter. Many of you purchase a jetter so you can cut roots and cut grease. Some of these nozzles might punch through some roots, might even be able to tear a little bit of it out, but generally if you're going to really get a pipe clean of roots and heavy grease, hard grease, you're going to want an advanced nozzle, and the 2 most common are the Reaper and the Warthog. Basically, the Reaper is a real good first attack nozzle. It has a rotating cone that is very sharp. If I put my hand in front of it, it would hamburger my hand. Okay. We have a video of this cutting through a 2x12 board. So there's a lot more information on these nozzles on some of our other videos on YouTube. And I go over nozzles in more depth. But in brief, the Reaper nozzle is more of a forward attack tool. It also does have back jets for flushing. And the Warthog also has forward cutting ability, but it really shines on its ability to scour the pipe and cut roots that, even like in a 6-inch pipe where the Reaper might miss roots that are coming in from the top of the pipe or build up on the top of the pipe, the Warthog, the entire head rotates very slowly with sharp water jets to scour the entire inside of the line. So you can ask which one's best. This is a better first attack. This is a better scouring and full cleaning nozzle. We call them the 1-2 punch. A lot of customers buy both of them. Okay, so let's do some live hydrojetting here. We've got a 4-inch trench drain with a grate access. Couldn't get that grate off, otherwise I would have used the tiger tail guide, but again, we have a video on that. So I'm gonna go ahead and just insert and make sure I get several feet into the line. And I'm gonna go ahead and pull out some hose so I have some to work with. With these sharp edges here, I'm going to be very careful not to cut the hose. So with wireless remote control, I just flip my wire switch on. I'm going to bring this valve up. When you're running wireless control, this safety valve isn't necessary because there's a secondary safety on the wireless remote. So to get ready to jet, I'll lift that all the way up. Now I'm ready to start my engine. Touch the on switch, which is like turning your key to on. Start it up. Give it a little throttle. And I'll pressure up. It's a pretty simple process here. You can see with the trench drain, the water jet moving along there. And this is quite a long run. If I wanted to really take the time, I would have pried this grate off, set my tiger tail in there as a guide, and worked it up and down. But in brief, that gives you a quick look at, again, in wireless mode, I set the valve up. Now for safety, I'll go ahead and move it down. Now my jetter's in the safety position, and I can clean up and move on to the next job. Okay, as I finished the job and pulled the nozzle out of the line, I went ahead and took the nozzle off and stowed it. It's really important when you're working with jetting hose to not let it loop and kink. Kinks cause a weak point in the hose and cause your hose possibly to rupture. Again, I talked about high pressure safety. Most kinks happen not when you're jetting, but when you're putting the hose away. It's important, especially if you have a lot of hose all laid out, stretch it out in a nice big loop. And then when you're winding, it won't have a tendency to curl into something like this, which you're not, if your back is turned to it and you're winding up the reel, you can have it catch on something and all of a sudden you're just going to pull this right into a kink. So a nice big loop makes that easy. And just finish winding up the hose. Try not to drag the hose in on the ground. And then we stow the hose right here, as we had it when we started. Draw the reel up. I like to lock the reel with the reel lock. And we're good to hit the road. That pretty much sums it up. Again, we have a lot of videos that go into detail on nozzles and whatnot, accessories, but that gives you a full run through on running the Eagle, all the features of the Eagle 200 jetter and operation there. Again, appreciate your attention, appreciate your order, encourage you to be safe and get out there and get jetting.